The most important thing to note right now is that IVF access and surrogacy are two different issues. They are often discussed together because it's about somebody's reproductive rights. But because the medical infrastructure and the legal infrastructure required for IVF expansion and surrogacy are massively different.
Welcome to this week's edition of Taiwan Talk. I'm Hope Go.
And I'm Berge.
This week, we're tackling the issue of IVF and surrogacy.
Two very important issues in today's climate. The whole medicine, technology aspects of it have changed, but also a lot of the cultural ways of looking at this issue have changed too. And so the law needs to start catching up with the times.
Now, to talk about the issue, we were joined by Rita Jhang, academic and IVF advocate, who began by explaining the status of IVF in Taiwan.
The technology, the IVF technology existed around the 80s, right? So there were babies born using this technology before the act was passed. So before that, it was like a really gray area. So the main gatekeeper are the doctors. The doctors will decide, do I want to help you do that? Do I not? And since it was, under discussion for a very long time, the issue that we're discussing today actually existed. It was the same issue for decades. Just that in year 2007, when the act was actually passed, it was narrowed to only heterosexually married couple. Of course, there was no same-sex marriage back then. So with a very important exception, a condition, the wife has to have a functional uterus. So there's no surrogacy at all in Taiwan, and the sperm bank is managed by the government. So there is no commercial sperm bank.
Is there a gray market for this kind of stuff in Taiwan at the moment?
Market?
Gray market, meaning do people try and find private customers where they can sell their eggs and stuff?
I do know there are people doing that kind of under the table, but not for money. It's more like, okay, I can help you as a friend and things like that. So there really isn't a lot of activity going on. So if you want to do it, you have to do it at the clinic, it's all under government management. The change will be very minor in terms of legal structure. You just have to add that this act is applied to also this group of people and that group of people, mainly female same-sex couple and single women.
Okay. Same-sex couples, women, and single women are okay. What makes homosexual men different in this equation?
Because for them to have their genetically related babies, they have to borrow somebody else's uterus. That's the difference.
Surrogacy.
Surrogacy, right? So you have to borrow somebody's uterus through surrogacy, right? So that is the legal and medical infrastructures that we just don't have. You need to have the laws, right, to stipulate, okay, say you are now, I hire you as my surrogacy. You say yes. What if the baby has some problem? The fetus has some problem. Then do I, as the person who pay for your uterus, say that, no, I'm going to terminate? Or do you, as the person carrying this fetus, have the right to say, no, I'm going to abort, right? So things like that. Or what if a married couple commission a woman's uterus for, to grow a baby? Halfway through, this couple gets divorced. Then who gets to say what happens to the fetus? There are just a million different scenarios that have to be considered in order for any surrogacy laws to be passed.
The same situation that you're talking about, the problems with surrogacy as to determining that the couple will still be together or the two people will still be working together when the child is born, could happen when outside of surrogacy too.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's all the same problem. So why? I guess I'm saying I can maybe understand why there's concerns, but why are these problems more bad,
amplified,
so to speak?
Right. Amplified.
When it involves surrogacy.
If we only look at the transactional nature of surrogacy, it could be very simple. However, because it involves another person's body, full body, and then it involves creating a life that's going to grow up to 18, 25, 50 years old. So that part of this transaction makes it so different from any other human transactions that we know of because a life is going to be produced.
Does this have to do with traditional views of how babies and life are perceived in Taiwan?
In that part, Taiwan definitely is still a very patriarchal society. That is absolutely true. Despite all our advances in human rights, in women's rights, and all that, Taiwan is always the most liberal, most progressive in terms of A, B, C, and D. However, it doesn't change the fact that fundamentally we are a very, very, just like, from the bottom of our heart, very patriarchal. So what I'm saying is, despite all the progresses we have made as a society, some part hasn't changed a lot. And that also reflects on the very, very low fertility rate in Taiwan. Taiwan has one of the lowest. I think according to CIA from the US, in 2021, they projected the country that will have the lowest birth rate is Taiwan. Oh my God, Taiwan number one. We always trying to chase Taiwan number one. But
we succeeded. Yay!
Yeah, finally. And we are recognized by CIA as an independent country.
Well, I don't know if we want the CIA to be doing that, but okay.
First of all, why CIA?
Exactly.
But anyways, but because that is consistent with all other reports, all the numbers that we know, Taiwan has a very, very low fertility rate, and we finally beat Korea.
But you're right. I mean, Taiwan does have a declining birth rate.
Yeah.
I think I've seen predictions that in 30 years or so, Taiwan's population will decrease by 30%, something like that.
Yeah.
So, given the fact that Taiwan wants to have more children, why shouldn't the government doing everything in its power to make that easier? Even if at times that may include some unconventional, so to speak.
Like IVF.
Right.
Yeah.
Forms of getting pregnant and maybe even forms of families.
So the government is doing everything they could to salvage the plummeting birth rate, right? They're doing everything they could. However, it is not an easy fix. So a lot of people think, people are just not getting married. Even if they get married, they don't have babies. But the numbers actually tells us that it's a very counterintuitive data that we have, counter to common beliefs. First of all, if you are married, the fertility rate has remained about 2 babies per marriage for the past couple decades. That hasn't changed. What has changed is that people are not getting married. And if they're not getting married, they're not having babies. So in Taiwan, children born out of wedlock is always, just 2%. That has been the same for the past 5-6 decades.
And that also ties back to the patriarchal system,
yes. Right? And then another counterintuitive observation that we have is that actually the higher socioeconomic status a woman is, also higher education attainment a woman has, actually this woman will want to get married more, not less. So people usually say, the more education women get, they would not want to get married. But the observation, the data that we have is not that. The higher you go, you actually want to get married. However, you will have a less likelihood to find somebody to get married to. So the number one reason people are not married is because they cannot find the right companion. It's not that, economy and all that. It has always been. And that's the same across age groups and also across socioeconomic status. And the higher you go, the more likely you're not going to find somebody.
So it's not a social economic problem. When you said that, my first reaction was, okay, maybe the government needs to make it easier to get married, or makes having a home and building a family
or make it easier to have babies.
Yeah.
Right. But you're kind of saying that's not quite the whole story.
Yeah, that's not quite the whole story yet. So most people want to get married, they just couldn't find the right companion. However, there is a huge oversight in terms of government data. So the public policy surveillance surveys that government does, there are dozens of them. Every couple of years they do that. They rarely ask men about these questions. Questions about marriage.
Don't ask me.
Or do you want to get married? No. So basically, so governments always ask women about marriage and children, but they rarely ask men about that. So now we have more data about why single women don't want to get married, or why are they not married, than we know about men.
Okay, can I take this back to the original conversation, which is, what is the way forward then for the discussion involving IVF and surrogacy, given the fact that the root causes of infertility in Taiwan has nothing to do with the unwillingness or the circumstances under which women have children? So what's the way forward for this then?
So based on the data that we have, so since year 2021, that was when the government expanded the subsidy for people to do IVF. So it used to be just low-income families, but that the number for low-income family to apply for this subsidy to get IVF is so low because it is expensive anyway. So they expanded the subsidy to just any married couple. Any infertile married couple since 2021. The number since then has always been babies born out of IVF is about 6% of all babies.
That's very low.
Yeah, that's actually still very low.
Against world standards, what does that look like?
Taiwan, any numbers about babies are just low compared to other countries.
Okay, so if this is a problem, then IVF doesn't appear to be a solution. Surrogacy appears to be the solution, no?
I would say because this is a multifactorial issue, it requires many different kinds of solutions. So I would say IVF expansion, it is still very important. There are single women who are capable and are willing to have babies, and that's why so many of them are freezing their eggs now. Weirdly, anybody can freeze their eggs, okay, regardless of age and whatever. You could do it if you pay. But in order for a woman to thaw the eggs that she froze, to use it, she has to be married to a man. That is, yes. So you can pay to freeze as many eggs as you want, but you cannot use it.
You can have a whole farm of people, and you can't use any of these.
Exactly, just like you buy, many eggs, put in your fridge, but you cannot cook them. So, right? Okay. So the egg freezing market is expanding, and then the commercials that these clinics put out usually target highly achieved women, highly achieved single women. And there's something like you're buying a hobby for yourself, freeze your egg so you can focus on your career and then have a baby later. But what I didn't tell them is that, no, you cannot do it unless you're married to a man, right? That's a weird discrepancy.
Correct.
So are they waiting for the law to change before they can thaw out these eggs and implant them the way they're meant to?
I think for the people that I know, they're either waiting for a law to change or waiting to meet the right guy. So which do you think more difficult right now? Yep. Yeah. So you're betting on two very difficult things.
Well, no offense, but I mean, marriage and divorce is not that difficult in Taiwan. Couldn't a woman just have a marriage of convenience and get those eggs out and have a baby? I mean, I'm just being practical.
But the price of getting into a heterosexual marriage is so high.
Why?
I agree. I completely agree.
Because of patriarchy. And then you will not believe how, if you go on any social media and you search something like 靠北婆家, it's like
complaining about
parents-in-law. Yeah, parents-in-law. You will see so many of these groups of women complaining about their husband and their, in-laws every single day on it. Because, I grew up, I'm a lesbian/queer person myself, and I grew up kind of very detached from this patriarchal society because I have a group of people that I usually hang out with. So I didn't know. I thought, by year 2015 probably that has all changed. So and I stumbled upon that whole world that I thought has ceased to exist. But apparently I was wrong. So then I realized, and then, so it's like our society is now developed into parallel universes. In one universe, women are empowered to, pursue whatever you want, but there is a, like coexisting universe where women are expected to fulfill all the patriarchal responsibility. And once those two worlds collides, when we are age 30, 35, stuff like that, people find it very difficult to reconcile the two different kinds of ideologies.
Newer than newer. That premise of that movie is all about a lesbian couple who go to America to have a surrogate child because in Taiwan it's so difficult.
The thing is, when people talk about IVF, like IVF expansion, it could be about, raising fertility rate. It also could be about just giving same-sex couple, single women, the same rights to have families.
Correct.
Because, rights to family is a bit, fundamental human rights. So one way is, about just giving people equal rights. And another side of it is, can we increase fertility rate by that? If we're only looking at the utility of IVF expansion, we might be disappointed, right? Because, well, the numbers aren't that high. It's okay, we give all this money to all these people, but only increase about 6% of babies. You probably wouldn't find it to be super convincing to expand IVF access. So I personally would think that, first of all, it wouldn't hurt. It's still a 6% increase. It's not nothing,
Correct.
right? Because
Anyway.
usually in Year of Dragon, you will see a boom in fertility rate.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a
because-
good year for babies.
Did
Yeah.
we see a boom in fertility
No,
rate?
this is the lowest ever Year of Dragon fertility rate ever. Yes, it's even lower than the Tiger's year. Usually it's the Tigers and the Dragons you will see a boom, but this year, the Dragons year, we saw a lower fertility rate than the Tigers year. So I would say 6%, 5%, or if we expand access, probably, I don't know, 8% of boom in fertility rate is not nothing. But if we're really restructuring our society to accommodate I think the low fertility rate that will not change for decades to come, we need a total revamp of our, infrastructure, of our industry and all that, rather than trying to increase the number back to when we used to have, 30 years ago. I just don't think that's going to happen. So in a way, we do want IVF access, we want surrogacy. Do we want surrogacy? Okay, let's put a pin on that. But we want, because that's a controversial issue, but we do want the government to be doing different things, to be trying different things at the same time, reimagining what our future would be like. And I just want a final note on surrogacy. The controversy surrounding surrogacy right now there is really no consensus even among the LGBT groups. Some people think that, yes, if we could create a law very complete, taking into consideration of all the different kinds of scenarios and make sure everybody gets, taken care of equally, then we can have that, because we want people to be able to have family in the way that they want. But there is a whole other side of it. It's one branch of feminist thinking, which is that surrogacy is always by nature exploitation of women, no matter what other things you do. The nature of it is exploitation.
You were listening to our conversation with Rita Jhang, academic and IVF advocate.
And it was a very interesting conversation. And I think at the end, both Hope and I realized that we only kind of touched the surface of these issues.
Thank you for tuning in.